In today's video, I'm reviewing Brian from Three-Legged Thing as a landscape photography tripod. Does it work? Hi everyone, thank you for joining me. I was going to do this review in the office, but it's a beautiful day and I decided I'd actually come to an outside office. This is my office for the afternoon. I'm in a picnic area just on the hills overlooking part of the Vinalopó River, downstream from Elche Dam. And I've just been down to the river, which is kind of down there, and done the last couple of shots, last couple of tests that I wanted to do of Brian. Yes, it really is called the Brian by Three-Legged Thing, a travel tripod, but I'm actually testing it out as a landscape photography tripod. So I'll just say before I get started that if you enjoy this video and you're new to my channel, please consider hitting subscribe. I love to get new subscribers, but I also love it when my subscribers come back and watch more of my videos. So if you're already a subscriber, thank you very much for the support. So I did a video 3.5 weeks ago, something like that, when I talked about why I'd bought this tripod. I bought it to replace my Manfrotto 055 CX Pro 3, I think that's what it's called. Which was having some problems. Now, if you wanted to find out more about the problems that I've been having and why I chose this tripod, I'll put a link to that video up there. So in the last 3.5-4 weeks, I've had the opportunity to get out and shoot with Brian on a few occasions. I've shot in the mountains, on the beach, on some rocks by the sea. I've used my wide-angle lens, I've used my telephoto lens, I've done short exposures, and I've done some long exposures. And I think I've used it enough now to be able to do a short-term review of whether this, which is a travel tripod, it's a lightweight travel tripod, whether it's suitable for landscape photography, or certainly for my landscape photography. The reason I've come here today, and the reason I've already been and done a couple of shots down by the river, which I'll show you later, is they were kind of the final tests, or at least one of them was kind of the final test that I wanted to do on this tripod to see how well it worked for me. So rather than just talking about the tripod and whether it's any good or not, I've decided I'm going to select 4 criteria which I think are important for a landscape photography tripod. And I'm going to talk about each of those criteria, and then I'll just do a kind of general wrap up at the end. So the 4 criteria that I've chosen are portability, ease of use, flexibility, and stability. So let's get rolling on. Portability. How easy is this to carry around, to get on location, to use it for landscape photography? I think portability is important, particularly as I'm getting older and I'm finding that the weight of my gear is pulling a little bit more heavily on me. So this tripod is designed as a travel tripod, so you'd expect it to be pretty portable. In this configuration, which is the way I normally carry it around, it collapses up to about 60 centimeters end to end. That's about 2 feet. You can flip the legs around 180 degrees into a travel configuration, which would be great for putting it into you know, your hand luggage, your carry-on luggage if you were flying with it, because then it only comes in at about 40 centimeters or 16.5 inches. And it only weighs 1.4 kilos, I think it is. So it's very, very lightweight. And I have to say that in terms of the weight on my back, I really, really like this. It's much easier to carry around. It's not just the weight, it's also because of the length of it. It doesn't pull on your back so much as you've got it strapped onto your rucksack. I'm sure there are smaller and lighter tripods out there, but then of course we run into the other criteria that we have to consider. So we'll be coming on to those in a moment, but in terms of portability, this scores very highly. 5 stars. Well done, Brian. Okay, my next criteria is ease of use. You've carried the tripod onto location along with all the rest of the gear. How easy is it to set it up, get it level, get the camera on it, get a composition dialed in, and then after you've taken the shot, get the camera off, collapse it all back down and get it ready for carrying again. So this is a 5-leg section tripod. So there's actually 4 locks on each leg. And that means that it's a little bit more fiddly to open and close than, say, my old Manfrotto, which was only a 3-leg section, only had 2 leg locks. But nevertheless, I can unlock these legs pretty easily. Normally, I can actually undo all 4 locks on one leg with one hand, and I don't have the biggest hands in the world. Even if you had small hands, you'd be able to do it with 2 quick twists, no problem at all. Unlocked, the legs extend easily, and if you extend them all the way out, the tripod is pretty tall. Obviously, because there are 4 locks on each leg, it just takes a little bit longer to lock each leg into place than it would do with if there was only, say, 2 locks, but it doesn't take very long. Leveling it is pretty easy. Just unlock one of the legs, give it a little bit of a tweak, check out the little bubble level, and away you go. Once you've got the tripod up, getting the camera on is really easy. There's no fancy stuff in the Arca Swiss compatible plate. It's just a standard vice type grip with a groove in it. Unscrew it, put the camera in, screw it back up again. And then what I always do is just give the camera a little twist just to make sure that it is actually locked in and I haven't made a mess of it, because otherwise you stand a chance of the camera falling off the tripod. But I do that with any quick release plate. Once the camera's on, actually getting the composition lined up. I must admit, when I first got it, I found the ball head a little bit odd to get used to. It's smaller than I'm used to. It has no friction control, so once you loosen it off, it is very loose. I was used to having a friction control, but I was also used to the fact that my Manfrotto ball head was very tight because it was having some problems, so I'd got used to kind of manhandling it. Don't need to do that with this one. And the first couple of times I found it difficult to get the composition exactly the way I wanted it, but once I got used to it, I'm actually finding it even easier than the Manfrotto. If you want to shoot panoramas, loosen off one screw and the head just swings around, so panoramas are really easy to do as well. Once you finish the shoot, taking the camera off is also really easy. Undo the screw, lift the camera off, just tighten it back up again to make sure it doesn't fall out, and then collapse each of the legs down. It takes a little bit longer perhaps because there are 4 locks on each leg, but it's not very long, and once they're closed up, it's dead easy just to tweak them closed. I have to be honest, it does take just a little bit longer to set up than my old Manfrotto, but that's because it's got more leg sections and more leg locks, and because they're twist locks rather than lever locks, I think it just takes a fraction longer. But it's fractions, it's a few seconds, it's not going to cause any problems. And so in terms of ease of use, I'm going to score this one really high again. 4.5 stars. Well done, Brian. My next criteria is flexibility. And flexibility is important to me because as a landscape photographer, a lot of the time I'm not using the tripod on level ground with the legs fully extended. A lot of the time I want the camera low down. I might be on very uneven ground, so I need to have the camera, one of the legs in a strange position. I might be in all sorts of strange setups, and that was one of the concerns I had with going for a much smaller tripod. Would it allow me to do that? So shooting in the normal upright position is dead easy. You'd expect any tripod to do it. Shooting with the camera low down, so getting that tripod low down, particularly I do that quite a lot for coastal scenes when I'm shooting on the beach or near to the sea. The that's proven, I would have to say, easier with this tripod than with my Manfrotto. I find it easier to get the camera lower down and nice and solid and stable, and not having the tripod legs sticking into the frame and things like that. So that's proven to be easier. Likewise, shooting low down on waterfalls has proven to be really easy. But what about the really tricky compositions when you're trying to get the camera into really odd places? Well, that's what I came here for today, because I've done 2 shots here today. One of them not so tricky and one quite tricky, and I'm just going to flip over and show you those 2 shots now. Okay, so I've got one leg of the tripod down in the water, the other 2 on the rocks. Camera's positioned with a landscape format. I've got circular polarizer on, taking glare out the water and adding contrast to the blue sky with the white clouds. That also helps to slow the exposure down a bit. But then I've also got the 6-stop ND filter in, ISO 64 f11, 1 second, focused basically about a third of the way in on this one. Keeps detail all the way through. There's nothing too far away and there's nothing too close. Okay, so this is the shot. I've got the tripod spread across the river stream here with the waterfall right in the foreground. And then we've got basically the waterfall heading back. ISO 125, f11, and circular polarizer to take out glare, and a 6-stop ND filter. That gives me 1 second. Worth a go. Okay, so that was the 2 shots, and you can certainly see on one of those I had the camera, the tripod, spread across a river with 2 legs on one side, 1 on the other. And I must admit, I was a bit concerned before I tried it that that thin end leg wouldn't provide enough support. It would flex and it would cause problems and it wouldn't be stable. But no problem at all. A little bit more fiddly to set up again on a situation like that than the old Manfrotto was. But then the Manfrotto was a lot bigger and a lot heavier. But in terms of flexibility and awkward positions, it scores pretty well for me. So I'm going to say probably 4 stars. Also, in terms of flexibility, there is a feature on this tripod that I didn't mention before. One of the legs actually unscrews and comes off completely. You can take the head off, put the head directly onto this leg, and you can have a monopod. I don't think it's a feature I'll ever use, because I don't think I've ever used a monopod before, but you never know, it might come in handy. And the final criteria is stability, and that's kind of what it's all about with a tripod. You want the tripod to be as stable as possible. And again, that was an area that I was a bit concerned about going for such a lightweight, small tripod, is would it be stable? So on my first trip out, I did some long exposures, one quite long exposure, I think minute and 50 seconds or something, I think it was. Admittedly wide angle lens, but it was in quite breezy conditions and I had no problems with camera shake or anything like that. I've done shorter exposure shots. I've shot with my 70-200 lens all the way out at 200mm when I was shooting some shots of the Benidorm skyline, and I did a panoramic shot which was shot at about 175mm. So again, it worked perfectly. Probably the biggest test I gave it in terms of stability was a 90-second exposure that I took on my last trip out. It was actually really quite windy. I mean, it wasn't gale force, but it was breezy. It was buffeting me around a little bit, and I shot at 70mm for 90 seconds. Now, I will admit, I did actually do two versions of that shot. The first one, when I looked at it after taking it, I wasn't 100% sure that it was sharp. I thought there might have been a little bit of motion blur crept in where the wind had been hitting the camera. So I took a second shot, but I positioned myself in to one side of the camera to shield it a bit more from the wind. Now, when I got those images back onto the computer, the second shot was perfectly sharp. 90 seconds at 70mm, and there was no blur at all in the bits of it that should have been sharp, in other words, in the building. The first one, there was just a hint of softness. But to be honest, you only saw that if you zoomed right into 100%, so pixel peeping, and with a little bit of sharpening, it was actually still usable. But I do think that I was starting to hit the limits of what the tripod could cope with in that configuration. But there were things I could have done to improve it. I could have dropped the tripod down a bit lower. That would have meant not having those much thinner, slightly more flexible bottom legs extended. And I could have hung my camera bag off of the little hook, and that would have put additional stability in as well. So I don't think there's any major issues with stability on this. You know, in very strong windy conditions, using a long lens and a long exposure is going to be a problem on any tripod, because no matter how solid the tripod is, you're still going to get some kind of buffeting and movement on the lens anyway. So stability, it's not as absolutely solid and stable as my old Manfrotto, but I didn't really expect it to be. But I think it's going to be good enough that with good technique and thinking carefully about how I do my shots, I don't think it's going to hold me back at all in the kind of conditions that I shoot in. So for stability, I'm going to say kind of 3.5 stars, maybe 4 stars. So that's pretty good for a tripod that weighs as little as this one does. Okay then, so it's time now for my final wrap up on the Brian tripod from Three Legged Thing. And my opinion on this is it's a perfectly good landscape photography tripod. If you regularly shoot in severe conditions, strong winds, you know, in real challenging conditions, you're probably going to want to go for something bigger and heavier. Landscape photography tripods are a compromise, because when you're out shooting, ideally you want the biggest, heaviest, solidest tripod possible, but when you're carrying it around, ideally you want something as light and small as possible. And I think Brian is an excellent compromise. It certainly has the flexibility, the portability and the ease of use that I was looking for, and stability wise I don't think it's going to hold me back. But as I said, if you are regularly shooting in storms and really severe conditions, you're probably going to want to be thinking about something a lot bigger and heavier. Okay, so that is my review of Brian. There it is, Brian. I hope you've enjoyed this. Of course, I'm going to be carrying on shooting with Brian over the coming weeks and months, and if I get any insights that change or enhance my opinions of it, I'll let you know. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like or a share or both. And I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you think. Comments down below. And that's it. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So, thank you very much. And until the next video, bye.